Hi, folks. John Henning here with the Franchise Radio Show. And today we're talking with Sue and Craig Derene, the owners of Franchise Connect Pro. Sue and Craig, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
John.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Now, look, before we get into the business stuff, anybody that's listened to any of my podcasts knows that I'm a big believer in people doing business with people. So before we jump into anything to do with franchising, let's go through a little bit about you personally. If you could tell us just a little bit about yourselves, maybe even without using the word franchise in that part.
Easy to do. Craig and I have known each other since elementary school. We grew up as best friends together, went to separate colleges. We're about to celebrate our 38th wedding anniversary. We have two amazing grown children. We now have two granddaughters as well, which is just fun. I always thought being an aunt was wonderful, but boy, being a grandma is even better. I've even gotten used to being called grandma. So he's still my best friend. And I think that, makes for a great long-term relationship like we've had.
Yeah, and Sue and I have been working together for about 9 or 10 years. So I joke when I say I have to check with the boss. I mean, I have to check with the boss, right, in multiple ways. But I'm very fortunate that Sue that started our business that we'll talk about shortly. We work extremely well together. We have our strengths and weaknesses, but we complement each other. And only regret is didn't do this 35 or 40 years ago, but love working with Sue, and wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, we both come from corporate backgrounds, and this is so much better.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, that's perfect because, I can agree 100% on the grandkids, right? I've actually got 4 of my own. So
Okay.
I'm with you. And I thought of being an uncle was great as well, but grandkids are even better. Now, how did you guys get into franchising? Kind of bring us up to speed of where you are today from your career. You mentioned the corporate ladder background. Bring us up to where you're at today. How did you get into franchising?
When do you start?
Sure. So really it was, I don't want to say it was by accident, but I needed to make a change in what I was doing. The kids were getting older and they were going off to college, and it was time for me to reevaluate what I wanted to do when I grow up. So Craig and I started to actually look at businesses. I took more of a lead on that and started looking at franchising. And I was fortunate to work with a franchise consultant. And the more I talked with him, the more I realized that what I really wanted was his job. And because of that, we became certified franchise consultants and haven't looked back since. It's been the right decision for me. I like the independence. I like the variety. And mainly I love helping people's dreams come true every day.
And I was in corporate for 30 some odd years, traveled extensively. When Sue decided to get back into, I would say, contributing revenue to the Derene household, that's when she started this business. And I guess it was about 8, 9 years ago. I wanted her job, just like she wanted Don's job. And, it worked out great that I was fortunate that Sue had a business, had a good run in a career, but wanted more flexibility, tired of the corporate politics.
Yeah.
So I came to Sue about 8, 9 years ago, and honey, I want to join your business. Her immediate response was, "Yippee." Anyway, you fast forward to today. It's been fantastic. Like I said previously, we work great together. And the only regret is, we didn't do this 30 years ago. So that's how it started, and we've only grown over the last 9, 10 years.
Now, the question everybody really wants to know is, did Sue have to interview you for the job?
No, but I did set a lot of ground rules.
Yeah.
Because I
Hey,
was
that's the best
clearly
way.
the boss.
Yep.
I was the boss, and I was going to remain the boss of the company for sure. So we did set a few ground rules before he joined.
Probably why it's been so successful together, though, right?
Yes. Absolutely. But there's no question it is her business. She's a subject matter expert. She sets lots of calls, and I'm totally fine with that.
Good deal. Now, you mentioned the word franchise consultant a couple of times here, both of you. So let's get into that side of it. What is it that you do? What is a franchise consultant?
Yeah. So the analogy that we always like to use, John, is very similar to realtors, right? Inevitably, people will, when they're looking at becoming an entrepreneur through franchise ownership, most people will just Google top franchises, right? They rely on SEO. And SEO is great, but that doesn't take the business model and how people want to spend their day and what they're trying to accomplish into consideration. So I always like to use the real estate analogy that if you were looking for a house, or somebody's looking for a house, they're not going to go to a real estate agent and say, hey, Craig, Sue, what's the best house for me? Of course, that real estate agent's going to want to know a 2-bedroom, a 5-bedroom, want to be in town, out of town. Want to spend 100,000, you want to spend 3 million, then you start looking at some houses and narrowing in. And so we're really very similar to realtors, but in the franchise world. So we always like to stress to people, even though inevitably we tell people what we do, and they always come to us and go, oh, I get it, but what's the best franchise? All right. Well, it depends. So what we really do is help people figure out, what are they trying to accomplish? Do they want a home-based business? Do they want a brick and mortar? How involved do they want to be? Right. And all those questions lead to what is the right business model. So I don't want to say the product or service isn't important, but you got to blend the product and service with the business model. And that's what we really do when we guide our clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's also helping people understand that they may have not been an entrepreneur yet, but let's talk about what that means. And are they really prepared to be an entrepreneur? Some people will say to me, I've always dreamed of owning my own business. And I'll say, that's great. What does that mean to you? And a lot of people don't really know what that means to them. So we talk through that as well, because I do think it's important that people understand that being a business owner is still work. You still have to work your business. Even with a great franchisor, he's going to provide you a great roadmap. There's still work involved, and it has to be work that they're willing to put in.
You know, and there are also sometimes, John, when, you know, people aren't a good fit for a franchise,
Sure.
right? Franchises are awarded. It has to be a good fit. So there are certain people that we speak with, quite frankly, right, that we love having conversations with anybody, but it's all about a marriage and a fit. So we take all of that into consideration. Also with franchise as consultants, we also help with financing. We help with the whole process, as much or as little involvement as our clients want us to be.
Well, Craig, I like the analogy used of working with a real estate agent, narrowing it down. I specifically liked what you said about folks don't just go to their real estate agent and say, hey, what's the best house for me? And I love that part of it, because you're going to help them, narrow it down. And I also like the example you used of the SEO scenario, because that happens all the time, right? Folks just go to Google, search for what is the best one, and whoever's the best at ranking shows up best, right? Shows up first. So I like that. And then Sue, you said one of the things that really resonated there was what does that mean to you? Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of folks come and they think, oh, I want to own my own business so I don't have a boss, right? Or I can control my future. And we know, being business owners, that it's still a lot of hard work, right? Owning a business.
Hard work. You're still your own boss, and you can make your own hours to a point, but that doesn't mean there isn't work involved as well.
And then it being the right fit too. You used one of my favorite phrases, Craig, about being awarded a franchise, right? Instead of buying or selling. So it's very, very interesting that you said it that way, because that's one of the words that is always in my mind in franchising. It really has to be that mutual fit, right?
It's for the most part, it's a 10-year contract. There are a handful that are a little bit less, but you'd never enter into a marriage without making sure it's a good fit. So it's very similar.
Right. That makes so much sense. Now, let's talk about the cost for your service. I imagine that folks would almost have to ask you, well, it sounds great what you do with me, but like, how much is this going to cost me? Right.
Sure. So our services to our clients are in fact complimentary. However, we are paid when one of our clients moves forward with a franchisor we've been discussing. And then the franchisor pays us. It does not cost our clients any more to have had us involved in making sure that they're making the right choice, kind of that first time. Really, our ask is, let us introduce you to the right franchisors. Let us be involved. Let us help you. We're going to save you time. You can't Google your way to the best business. We're going to save you money, because you are going to make the right choice the first time and stay within your reasonable investment parameters. So it's complimentary to you, and we think we're really good at what we do.
Yeah, and we're very transparent.
Sure.
We don't ask people to sign a contract at the end of our conversations. We're never going to get people to commit, right? Sue and I are, like you mentioned earlier, we're grandparents. We're trusting people. We do the right thing. Sometimes it backfires, but 99% of the time, people are honest and transparent. And that's all we ask is communication. And if you're looking at a franchise already, totally fine. Just let us know, right? So we don't duplicate efforts. That's all, right? And So you know,
Well,
we'd
we
love
look
having
at
people.
it too, is we can't convince someone to buy a business. There's no talking people into buying a business. What we can do is help make sure you're on the right path with the business that you want. And we very much take that approach. I've become really good friends with a lot of our clients. I talk to them for a long time after. I get to know their kids. I get to know when they're having their grandchildren or their child. And that's what makes this business a lot of fun as well.
Well, it's interesting. You said that you save them not only a lot of time, but you're able to save them some money as well. And then one thing that you mentioned was providing the value. And I think, Craig, that's where you were going with the we don't need a contract type thing. It's
Right.
because you're going to show them the value of what you're bringing to the table for them with a, no obligation type scenario, and show that good faith, present some options, provide them with a lot of good information, and that's going to give them the value that they need, like you said, Sue, and pointing them in the right direction, right? And making
Absolutely.
sure they understand everything fully. And then there's no additional cost to them for actually purchasing a franchise through one of the franchisors then.
Correct.
That's right. The example I always like to use is if somebody Googled, you know, and found Acme franchise, and the franchise fee was, let's say, 50,000, and they move forward with Acme franchise, they would write a check to Acme franchise for 50,000. If after we go through our process of figuring out what is the right franchise for John, and it turns out it's Acme franchise, they would write a check to Acme franchise for 50,000. Acme gives us a percentage of that 50K
Sure.
because we're helping the clients. And on that
We're also
note,
bringing really good fits to that
right,
franchise.
right. And so on that note, that's really what that's the value that we bring is, you know, not only finding the right business model and saving time, but the best way I could put it is to give you an example. I do a lot of networking in the local community, and I can't tell you how many franchisees that purchased a franchise prior to meeting myself in these networking meetings. I said, Craig, I wish I met you 6 years ago. I
Sure.
might not have wound up in this carpet cleaning franchise. I like what I do, but a lot of people don't know we exist, right, to help them through that. And that's really the value. And then we also help them, as I mentioned earlier, through the whole process, what questions to ask, due diligence. And that's where Sue is really great at, holding their hand. It's a nerve-wracking experience, and Sue is very good at helping people through that whole process.
Let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about the people, right? So let's talk about the folks that you're generally working with. Do you see any common themes of folks that
Absolutely.
you're connecting with or that are reaching out to you for your services?
Absolutely. Not in total, but the majority of our clients are definitely people who've kind of grown up in the corporate world. They've learned a lot. They've got some great skills, but they're a little tired of working for someone else. I
Sure.
think COVID has increased that even more. People don't want to go back to an office. They want to work from home. They want to go to, their son's baseball game or whatever, and be able to have the flexibility in their day to do that. People coming out of corporate careers, no matter what your career was and what line of business, there are so many skills people have learned that they don't really see themselves having. They take for granted that they've been able to be successful. And a lot of those transferable skills are what we talk about that work so well as a business owner. So again, primarily people coming out of corporate world, either because they want to or because someone else thought they wanted to get out of the business. And that's really the majority of our clients. I also personally work with a lot of people who've been stay-at-home moms who, like myself, needed to know what to do now when they grew up because their kids had the nerve to grow up. So we work a lot with stay-at-home moms as well, who no longer want to just stay at home.
Yeah, and let me go back to and I say corporate people, but this is applicable to anybody. There are lots of semi-absentee and even full absentee options. So we work with corporate people, as Sue mentioned, that have either voluntarily or involuntarily left corporate, and they realize that corporate's not, secure and anything could change. But we work with equal number of people that are looking to create an additional revenue stream while keeping their day job. And there are lots of great options. And that's obviously, there are different kinds of business models. So we work with lots of people that have a plan of leaving corporate in a couple of years, but they're not ready today. So they start a business, keep their day job, get that business up and running until that business, is generating enough income. And those are, again, all the conversations that we have. Are you looking to build a mini empire or a kingdom, et cetera? So again, I just wanted to stress that semi-absentee and absentee options where you keep your day job is also very viable.
Now, I wanted to piggyback on something you just said there too, Craig, is the process, right? Like, what are you going to be doing with them? Let's talk about that for a minute. How does the process work? So I said, hey, I'm a corporate executive. I'm thinking about starting a business. I've raised my hand and said, Craig and Sue, I'm interested in talking with you. What does that process look like with you guys?
Yeah, well, it first starts that says, my boss says, Craig, go talk to this person. And I go, okay, boss. But why don't you talk about the process?
Really, it starts with conversations, getting to know the person, getting to know what kind of business might be of interest to them. The money is important, and it's obviously about earning a wage for yourself and creating equity in a business and all that. But you also have to kind of like what you're doing. So we talk about those questions. What are your key objectives? Maybe your key objective is to earn X dollars by year 3, and we'll talk about that. So it's getting to know them. It's getting to talk about different industries. There's, I don't know, roughly 32 different industries represented in franchising. Let's talk about what might be of interest. Maybe you've had a hobby and, you really like to do sports. Well, maybe you want to look at some sports alternatives, whether that's fitness or, helping kids or whatever the case is. So it's a lot of conversations. Once we've done that, we do have a couple of assessment forms we ask our clients to complete. We call them our homework assignment. But that's just to get more insight into them and also to help them and their family think about things they probably haven't thought about in looking at a business. And then my skill set is really to help match them with some opportunities. I'll come back with 3 or 4 typically business recommendations, never within the same industry or competitors to each other. I like people to review different business models, what that means and how it ties to their objectives and goals. And then if they get focused on one specific area, then we may bring in a competitive brand to that as well. But all the way through the process, funding, legal reviews, etc.
Yeah, so, whether it's Sue and I work as a team, so whether Sue had that initial conversation or I had that initial conversation, we're a 2-person organization, but we do have a CRM system. We take copious notes, put it into the CRM system. So we know what we know of all of the conversations that might have occurred with Sue, myself,
Sure.
or both of us. But that homework assignment that Sue alluded to is also I want to stress that's a rather important piece of the puzzle. Because I'd say 80% of the time people come back and go, wow, I'm glad you made me fill that out. I never thought about that. And we love hearing that. That's really the intent. It's not to create a homework assignment,
Sure.
right? But it's to think about it. And we also love when there's, it's a husband and wife or partners or spouses, right? And you have multiple people in the business. Hey guys, each of you fill this out because you might have different mindsets. And like Sue said, right, that's what Sue, is really good at. And at dinner time, many times our dinner conversations over a glass of wine are frequently talking about these candidate profile forms that come back to us.
It's important also to remember that we're 2 heads, and 2 heads are always better than 1 head. Right. We have different backgrounds, Craig and I, and we bring that to the table for our clients as well.
Something you both said there also that I want to emphasize is when you have multiple folks, and A may not think the way that B does, and so someone may want to do something like this and the other one says, wait a minute, but if they fill out one form, they're going to try and agree to what they think they like versus doing each of them doing it. I love that approach 100%, because then that also allows you to say, Mary, Joe, this is what each of you said about this one, so we went and found this. It fits all of these, but it doesn't hit this one for Joe, but it hits these ones for Mary. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, John, for your listeners that are out there, I don't want people to get the impression that, well, if you don't do your homework assignment, we're not going to work with you.
Right.
That's not true, right? If people prefer to just talk through it, right? It's a guideline. It's suggested, right, to start that dialogue. So we're happy to, not force people to do their homework assignment if they'd rather talk.
So if I'm going through the process with you, if I'm Mary or Joe and I'm going through the process, we've done the questionnaires, we've had these conversations, and then I start talking with the franchisors, is that kind of where our relationship ends, or are you working with me on an ongoing basis through the whole?
We absolutely will continue to work with you throughout the whole process. We help you with questions to ask the franchisors. We help you with questions to ask franchisees when you get into validation and speak with current owners.
Okay.
We can help you with the funding piece. We work with a number of funding partners as well. So we never go away. I think it's really important that, Craig and I are objective in which brands people go with as well. So it's important to keep that dialogue going and see if, maybe it would point us at some point to a different business altogether for them.
So the only correction I'll make to my wife is she used the term "we," which is awesome. But the reality is, after the first phone call or two, no one ever talks to me again. They just love talking to Sue. So she's
true.
so
That's true.
yes, it's
She's
we.
including you in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but so thank you,
Yes.
boss, for including me. But she's really our subject matter expert. Anyway, so I say that jokingly, but inevitably that tends to be true that I'm forgotten about down the road. And also, if there are occasionally there are some serial entrepreneurs that we work with. So it's not just corporate people, that people own multiple businesses. They've been in business all their life and they're just looking for their next business. Right? We're happy to work with those people, but many times those people have been to the movie before. They go, okay, great, Craig. All right. We no longer need your help. Thanks for introducing me to Acme Franchise. Get the heck out of the way. We're fine with that as well. We take the lead from, how much they want us to be involved or not.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I want to go back to something you said earlier in here, that when you used your analogy about the real estate scenario, what is the best house? And I want to throw you this one out there because I already know the answer to this one, but I want our listeners to pay close attention to the next question because it's a super important one. I can't imagine you guys never get asked this question, but what is the best franchise? What's the best one for me?
It's one of our favorite questions.
No, never.
There are a lot of great best franchises. But there's probably only one, maybe two best franchises for you, the individual.
Mhm.
What works for your neighbor, Joe, may not work for Sally, and so forth. And so there is a lot of great franchises out there. And that's our job, is to help you find your best franchise versus, a best franchise.
Yeah.
There's a big difference in that statement.
Yeah. So a couple of color commentaries on that. We've run the numbers and it's not just us as consultants. 7 out of 10 times when people move forward with a franchise, when they've worked with the franchise consultant, they move forward to the franchise in something other than what they originally thought or even had in their mind, right? Because they just don't know what they don't know. And once they go through the process that we're talking about here, it's a whole new world. So I don't want to, most people think the McDonald's, the Subways, the Chick-fil-A's of the world, and those are great franchises, and right. But that's what most people think about, right?
Sure.
There are 5,000 franchises plus out there. We represent 800-900 of them, right? So not all of them, but more than enough to find the perfect franchise, right? All we ask is keep an open mind.
Sure. And I'd agree with that 100% on what you said about the phrase you used on the folks that move forward with a franchise that was different than what they thought they wanted in the beginning. So I liked, Sue, what you said about the difference between a best franchise and the best franchise for them, right?
Absolutely.
So,
There's a big difference.
what was your phrase you used? There's multiple best franchises.
There are.
Yeah.
But there's only one best franchise for you. Maybe
that's
two.
what it was. That's what it was.
Maybe
Yes.
two. Yes. Absolutely.
Perfect. Now let's talk about the areas of the country. Are there areas of the country that are bigger growth opportunities for franchising? Do you see any trends on market areas that are better than other areas?
I would say geographically, really anywhere can host a franchise. I would say that there are a handful of very rural areas that may not be great for as many franchise opportunities, just frankly, because there's not the population, but anywhere in the country absolutely works for franchising. I'd say one of the newest trends is some of the younger people getting into franchising, the millennial generation and things like that. A lot of them grew up saying, yeah, I'm never going to work for anybody. And that's okay.
Right.
So it's more of an age shift, I would say, than a geographic switch right now.
And we do work nationally. And the franchisors themselves, they have all the demographics based on territory. Sue and I take that into serious consideration as well, right? What are the demographics? So it's not just what is the best franchise for you, but is it a growing area, right? Where do you live? All, what's missing? All of those demographics come into what is the right business model.
Absolutely.
In certain areas, like Sue and I live in Atlanta, spoke to a guy in Charlotte, it's sort of a double-edged sword. Some of these, especially down south, these hotter areas that are growing is great for franchises, right? Because they're, the suburbias are expanding. The bad news is, right, if people don't move quick enough, sometimes another person comes in and buys the whole region, the whole county, et cetera. So we always sort of advise our clients that are in or hot areas, okay, you don't have to make a decision today or tomorrow, but if you wait, just bear in mind that opportunity may not be available 6 months from today.
Now, if someone were interested in owning a franchise, what type of financial resources should they have? How much capital? Is there a net worth number? Like, we hear a lot of numbers in franchising.
There are
If
a lot of
somebody's
numbers.
thinking about franchising, when should they think about starting?
Well, we start thinking about funding on our very first conversation.
Okay.
There are net worth requirements with all franchises. Obviously, that net worth requirement varies based on the cost of the franchise and the size of the investment.
Okay.
Liquid capital, you need to have some liquidity. And again, that number varies based on the businesses we're looking at. And that comes into our play of, matchmaking, if you will, to the franchise. But we have people talk with some of our funding partners right off the bat to understand the options. What are their options for funding? There's a lot out there that some people aren't aware of. But we talk about it early on. It's important to do it simultaneously. You want to know that if you fall in love with, we'll use Acme again, Acme franchise, that not only if it's awarded to you, are you going to move forward, but that you can financially move forward. Craig and I do not like people to spend their last dime on their business.
Sure.
It's just not a good scene. So that has to be discussed early. And again, it goes back to the realtor example. You have to know what you're pre-qualified for in a mortgage before you really can go too forward in looking at a house. And it's similar in franchising.
And again, we work with several specific franchise lending partners, large companies that we can introduce our clients to as well. We know a reasonable amount of financing, but that's not our area of expertise. So again, no pressure, no obligation. We always say just have a casual conversation with one of our partners to learn about your options.
Right.
So like Sue mentioned, we suggest that early on.
And that makes sense, right? It's like you said about the real estate, analogy there. You want to make sure that you're looking at the right types of businesses that would reasonably fit within your budget and also fit within what your needs and wants are too. Doesn't make sense to look at something might fit a need and a want, but if, ultimately you would never have the resources to actually be able to fulfill that, then it just wouldn't make sense, right?
We're a big believer in not wasting anyone's time, whether that's the client or the franchisor. Franchisors, like to work with people like ourselves because we bring them good, qualified, understanding, well-educated potential franchisees, and that funding has to come into that.
Now, I've heard in the industry about some alternative options too, like 401k, IRA financing, or is there anything like that you guys can help them tap into as well?
Absolutely. And that's really something a lot of people aren't aware of, that they can use their own 401k from a previous employer or their traditional IRAs, roll that over into, John's new business 401k without pre-withdrawal penalties, no tax penalties. It's been around since the 70s, but unless you've looked at owning your own business, a lot of people aren't aware of it. Some people also look at small business loans, SBA loans. They're taking a lot longer than they used to. Just the government's working a little slower on those. A lot of people will use home equity lines of credit. Sometimes there's just a portion of that, maybe the liquidity portion they need. There are a lot of various ways to fund a business, and that's why it's important that you look at that right up front.
What would you say if I were an entrepreneur thinking about exploring franchise ownership and I'm out there searching around, how would the best way to be to get in touch with you guys? How should we start the conversation? Do you prefer me to give you a call on the phone? And what is that number? Is there a website? What's the best way for folks to reach you?
Sure. Well, all of the above. So we're very reachable. So our website is www.franchiseconnectpro.com. all one word, franchiseconnectpro.com. From there, there's a contact form. It has our email, it has our phone number. There's actually a link to, we use Calendly for our appointments. So people frequently just go ahead and see availability. So, you don't get into the phone tag game. If people want to call or text direct, that's totally fine. But even on our website is, as I mentioned, the Calendly. In our emails is a link to our Calendly app as well. We're also very active on social media, mainly LinkedIn. So we love when people connect with us. Sue Derene has her own profile. I'm Craig Derene. And then we have a company, Franchise Connect Pro page as well. All our contact information is there. Twitter, Facebook, et cetera. But realistically, website or LinkedIn is probably the quickest.
All right, good deal. And I'll make sure to include all of your contact information. We'll make sure to get that from you, and
Great.
we'll include that underneath of the interviews here as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I want to give you guys the last word as we finish up here. Take us through kind of just a little bit of a recap. All of that important information we talked about, just kind of open it up for you to get in the last word here as we finish up.
Thanks, John. Well, I would encourage anybody who's even remotely thinking about it, give us a call. Let's have a conversation. There's no obligation to a conversation. So I would love to talk to anyone. And I just want to point out one thing we didn't get into and didn't have time on this interview is when we're looking at franchises, absolutely, we're going to look at what matches your goals and objectives and your long-term vision as a business owner. But Craig mentioned earlier, there's roughly 4,000 or 5,000 franchises. We only represent around 900. That's because we're also looking at how well capitalized is the franchise system that you're going to potentially become involved in. What's their support? What's their training? What's their franchisee satisfaction? So just wanted to mention that quickly, that there's a lot more to it. And that's what part of the value of what we bring to our clients. But, let's have a conversation. That's really what's important. The more we talk, the better we can understand each other and know what someone might be interested in.
And we practice what we preach, right? So we're part of a larger organization, as Sue mentioned. John, when you first asked how we got into the business, right? She said she was talking to this gentleman, Don, and said, "Oh, I want your job." Right. Well, that's ultimately how. So we bought in, just like any other business, into our parent company. They originally trained Sue and myself, set up our website. But probably the most important thing that they do for us today, and we pay royalties just like any other franchise, is they really vet the franchises. Right. So Sue and I do additional due diligence, but that first cut is there's a team at corporate that's all they're doing is making sure these are viable franchises, they have the backing, et cetera. And that's where those 800 or 900 come from. And then over the years, Sue and I have traveled extensively, met CEOs, been to discovery days, and we know, the best of the best. But I wanted to stress again that we're paying a royalty just like any other franchisee would, and it's a tremendous benefit. And all those franchises are listed on our website as well.
Well, I love what you guys do. I love how you've presented it. I think you've really presented a real value proposition for most entrepreneurs that are thinking about starting a franchise. We'll definitely make sure to include your information here at the Franchise Radio Show for contact information. And I just want to say thank you so much for jumping into the interview with me. It has been great.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, John. This is great. Everything from the beginning communication to today's session was very professional. So, like Sue said, thanks for the opportunity. We enjoyed chatting with you.
You're very welcome.